It's February and love is in the air. Unless you're in Texas right now at the beginning of February where there's an ice storm hitting later today. So it's cold, but let's warm my cold, dead heart by reading some romances. Now, if you are new here, you don't know that I hate contemporary romance. Least favorite genre out there, most likely. Yeah, I hate contemporary romances and I hate the miscommunication trope, which is really big in contemporary romances. On the other hand, I tend to like fantasy romance quite a bit, unless it has a miscommunication trope. But what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to read 3 romances that I need to read for various reasons, but I don't think I'm gonna like, and then 3 romances that I do think I'm going to like and that I want to read. So let's go through them. Let's go through the ones that I don't want to read first. First up is People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. Now, there is nothing about this book that appeals to me. It's basically 2 best friends, a guy and a girl, go on a vacation, a 1-week vacation every year. Something's happened like 2 years ago and they stop talking to each other, and she like begs him to go on one final trip where she's going to try to fix their friendship. And it's friends to enemies to lovers romance, I think is what it is, but it sounds like there's a miscommunication trope in here. And I hate it. I hate it already. Why am I reading this? This won Goodreads Choice Romance of the Year. And I'm reading all the Goodreads. So yeah, we're gonna try this. I don't know. Next up is One Last Stop by Casey Mcwhiston. This is got a little bit of science fiction in it. It's basically a sapphic romance where this girl lives in New York City and she meets another girl on the subway, but the girl that she meets on the subway is from the 1970s and she's been trapped on the subway. And that's all I know about this book. Hopefully that wasn't a spoiler, because I already know it before I've ever read this. Anyway, I got this in a book subscription box, page 1, I believe, and even though I have no interest in this, it apparently has an unlikable female character, so this is the one that I'm most hopeful about because it does have science fiction aspects and it's a sapphic romance instead of just a heteronormative romance, so maybe that makes it better. We'll find out. The final one I don't have yet. I got it on hold from my library. I don't know that it's going to come in time, and I'm afraid that I'm going to have to buy it, and I absolutely know I'm going to hate this. Like, I know 100% that this book is a miscommunication trope. So this is The Spanish Love Deception by, I don't know who it's by. I'm sorry. I don't have that written in front of me. Anyway, it's on the cover. You can see it. So The Spanish Love Deception follows a girl and a heteronormative relationship with this guy. It's enemies to lovers, but I know this is a miscommunication trope because I heard somebody else talking about it, and it's basically she overhears him saying something mean about her when they very first meet, and from my understanding she misunderstands what he says and who it's about. So he didn't say what she thought he said, and he didn't say it about her, but ever since then she's been nothing but hateful and mean and bitchy towards him when he's been nothing but unfailingly polite. And then eventually it's going to turn into a romance because it's a romance book. So I hate that. That is like, that is the trope that I hate more than anything. Like, right there. Like, I know going into this book that I'm going to basically hate read this. Also, the main character I hear is a bimbo, so she's purposefully unintelligent, and hateful and bitchy for no reason. So exactly the kind of character that I hate and definitely don't want to read from her perspective. Not really looking forward to this book, if you can't tell. Did I tell you why I need to read The Spanish Love Deception? It's the winner of Goodreads Choice debut novel, if I didn't say that earlier. Anyway, the 3 that I didn't want to read, now the 3 that I do. So first up is A Lesson in Thorns by Sierra Simone. This is smut. It's not romance. I don't know a whole lot about it other than it's like a group of high school friends who are now well into their adulthood, late 20s, early 30s, and they are researching something, because I know it involves a library. I also know it involves a lot of orgies. So this one, as far as I can tell, is just straight smut. There's no romance really to it. It's just sex. So I haven't really read anything like that in a very long time, and I've heard good things about it. It sounds interesting. It's like intellectual and smut, so why the hell wouldn't I read this? The other book that I have is also smut. This is Desperate Measures by Katie Robert, and this is a Aladdin retelling, except for consensual BDSM between Jasmine and Jafar. So the relationships between the bad guy and Jasmine, I think Aladdin might be a bad guy in this book instead of the good guy, but a lot of smut, a lot of BDSM, why not? The third and final book is going to be a surprise to both of us because I haven't picked out a third book yet. So at some point in this video, we're going to go on a shopping trip and find a third romance for me to read. Anyway, let's jump right into the video and talk about what I read first. Okay, I need to interrupt myself here and put in a disclaimer, because apparently I didn't like somebody's favorite book years ago in a video, and they're going a little insane in my comments. Don't bother looking for it, it's already been deleted. But I don't like contemporary romance, so I'm about to roast potentially some of your favorite books. If you can't handle that and can't understand that I don't have to necessarily like the same things you like, and that you don't have to like the same things I like, then I'm gonna need you to just exit the video here. If you're gonna say something hateful in the comments, don't bother. I get notifications for all of my comments, and I'm just gonna instantly delete it, and no one else is going to see you being a shitty human being, so you're not going to get the attention that you want from those comments. And if you think you're gonna affect me, maybe I'm old. I don't care what you have to say about me. All your hateful comments show me is that you are very insecure and in desperate need of love and attention, which I'm not gonna give you. So take it somewhere else. Anyway, back to the regular scheduled video. All right, the first romance down, and I hate it so much. I hate everything about this book. Actually, that's not true, but I hate almost everything about this book. So this follows a girl, Poppy, and a guy, Alex. Is from Poppy's perspective, and they've been best friends for like 15 years or 12 years or some shit like that. And every summer they go on a vacation together, and it kind of started as budget vacations, and as they got older and had more money, she's got a job writing for a travel guide, the vacations get a little bit bougier and everything like that. But 2 years ago, something happened on their summer vacation, and they haven't talked to each other since. And so that's the setup. And then she reaches out to him this summer and says, hey, before school starts, do you want to take one last vacation together? And she wants to try to repair whatever this big drama that happened at the end of the vacation. So we go through this book with the vacation they're taking that summer and everything that goes wrong, because it has to go wrong because she's trying to fix things. And then we get alternating chapters with flashbacks to the previous vacations they've taken over the past 12 or 15 or whatever the fuck years. This is very formulaic. Like, I don't even read that much contemporary romance, and I know this is formulaic. So you've got like the story, and it's a slow burn romance. They've got all of the shared bed tropes and friends to lovers tropes and all of that stuff. And then they fall in love and start banging. And then you have at the very end of the book, you've got that plot twist where there's suddenly drama, where drama doesn't need to exist, that's completely out of character for both of them, just to create a conflict at the end of the book. And then the next chapter, we figured out why they initially stopped talking to each other for 2 years, which was fucking stupid. And then it all gets resolved and they live happily ever after. Anyway, if Poppy was a real person, she and I would not be friends. I hate everything about her and her pretentious girlfriends, and their tasteless bad jokes. Alex, I was fine with, other than the fact that he's somehow attracted to Poppy, which doesn't make any sense at all. It's obvious throughout this entire book that both characters want to bang, and it's like, how do you go 15 years with this much sexual tension and you still haven't banged? Like, what? Like, this is... You're acting like 16-year-olds. Actually, no, 16-year-olds would be fucking like bunnies. You're acting like idiots. I don't know. I have no reference for this level of, but we're only friends because real people don't act like this. I did throw this across the room at one point, because I hated it so much. What is redeeming qualities? Redeeming qualities, I read it in one day. It was a fairly quick read. There were a couple of scenes in here, or one-liners, where I giggled. Like, there were some jokes where I was like, okay, that's a little bit funny. There were also some jokes where I'm like, wow, you wrote that down on a piece of paper and it got published. Yikes. And there was a couple of scenes where I cried, not really involving Alex and Poppy, but like Alex's brother gets married at one point in here, and like the speech about like how much his brother means to him and everything like that. Like I teared up a little bit. Overall, if you like contemporary romance, you will probably like this. This is like so incredibly generic, formulaic contemporary romance that if this is your thing, if this is what you like, then there's nothing wrong with this book and you're gonna like it. For somebody who doesn't like contemporary romance, this doesn't even really have the miscommunication trope in it, and I still hated it. It kind of has a miscommunication trope, but it's not like overly done. But yeah, I hated this. I still stand by the fact that I hate contemporary romance. If you want to change my mind, recommend contemporary romances down in the comments below. I still don't think this is the book in this video that I'm gonna hate the most. I think I'm gonna dislike the Spanish Love Deception more. We'll see when we get there, but next up I'm gonna read something that I actually want to read instead of this shit. So I just finished a lesson in Thorns, and this is not at all what I thought it was, but I think I still like it. let's discuss. And I have a lot to say, so I'm going to try to make this as quick as possible. First things first, I'm going to review the summary because I didn't really have it right. So this follows 6 people, and they were friends as children over one summer at this old Victorian mansion in England. Their parents were doing something mysterious. They didn't really know what was going on, but they became friends that summer and, you know, did children things. But they, like, didn't really necessarily continue their friendship after that summer. Like, some of them did, but like as a group as a whole, they did not. In this book, they come back together as adults, not necessarily as like a sense of friends gathering, but it's work. We've got 3 girls, 3 guys. We've got Auden, I think is his name. He is the owner of this Victorian mansion, and he is remodeling it after the death of his father to kind of like forget. Delphine is Auden's fiance, so that's why she's at the house. Then Rebecca is a landscaper, so he hired her to landscape the property. Then you have Beckett, who is now a priest, and he is just happens to be the priest of like a nearby area, and it sounds like he and Auden stayed friends throughout the years. Then you have Saint Sebastian, who was kind of the poor outcast of the group to begin with. His parents weren't there originally. He was just a poor kid from the village who kind of ended up hanging out with them because they were roughly the same age. So he still lives in the village. And then our main character, Persephone, is a librarian, and she is hired to catalog the library. So that's why they all come back together. So the story is basically about like them rebuilding this relationship that they had as kids, plus they find pagan rite documents in the library and then kind of like want to act this out. What does this do well? This does a lot of things well, and I'm surprised. One of the big things for me is the communication in this book. All the characters like talk to each other. Consent is the theme of this book, where they're constantly like, do you consent to this sexual act? Do you consent to this kiss? Do you consent to watch other people perform sexual acts? You know, things like that. Like consent, 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 consent. There is no question of lack of consent in this story, which you don't necessarily get in a lot of books. And the fact that this is so concerned with consent, there's huge amounts of communication. People like think and talk about everything they're doing in here, and they are like, this is how I feel, and talk about it, which I think that's what annoys me most in contemporary romance, is that no one ever talks about it. They just assume things and then throw hissy fits. There's actually a quote that basically sums all of what I just set up, and it's Beckett saying, "You can have it any way you like as long as you think about it first and hurt no one else." So the other thing about this that makes it feel not necessarily contemporary is that it's set in this old Victorian mansion. And it is modern times, but it just feels like there's pagan rites, and they're in a Victorian mansion, and there's not really a lot of interacting with society. I mean, they're on laptops and doing modern things, but it's kind of background, so it doesn't really feel like a contemporary romance. And as far as like romance goes, there's not a lot of romance. There is a little bit of romance, but it feels like this is more about lust than love. There's love, but it focuses more on the lust, if that makes sense. Now, what I didn't like about this book, because there are things that I didn't like. First off, there's no sex in here. The book's like 340 pages. There's no sex until like page 300, and then there's like 40 pages of sex. And it's just like, I thought this was smut. And there's no sex. There's other sexual activities and a lot of horniness. Like, our main character is super fucking horny, but there's no sex. So I have learned that pining is not something I'm interested in reading in contemporary. It was like, I'm like, dude, just bang, like, get it over with. I am sick of hearing you complain about lusting over somebody and we can't, but I want to, but we can't, but I want to. Like, seriously, just get it over with. I learned that about myself. Pining, not my thing in romances, apparently. So yeah, that's what I really didn't like about it, is the pining and the lack of as much smut as I expected in it. I also want to say that the representation in this book is way better than I thought it would be. We've got Fat Rep. The character Delphine is fat. She's confident. It's not like negative Fat Rep. It is very positive body, positive Fat Rep. Persephone is disabled. She has narcolepsy, which the author has. So it's from basically the perspective of the author. It's like how her narcolepsy is treated. Rebecca is black. Saint Sebastian is half Mexican. So these aren't all just white people in England. There is racial representation. There's diversity in it. And everybody's bi, so the guys sleep with the guys, the girls sleep with the girls. There's an actual love triangle. I think this is the first time I've read an actual love triangle. Like, Auden wants to be with Saint Sebastian and wants to be with Persephone, and then Persephone wants to be with Auden and Saint Sebastian wants to be with Auden and Persephone. Like, that's an actual real, honest to God love triangle. And I was very excited to read a real love triangle. The other three, there are foreplay scenes between like Rebecca and Persephone, and Rebecca and Daphne and Auden. The only person who doesn't really participate in any of the actual like sexual encounters, like he watches but doesn't do anything, is Beckett, but he's also a priest. So that made me a little bit uncomfortable. I'm not Catholic or anything, I'm not religious, but having a priest in character is a little icky to me, because priests are supposed to be celibate, and I'm just not, like, my mind doesn't comprehend somebody who is sexual in a healthy way and somebody who's a priest. So yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. It was done well, but I have personal trouble wrapping my mind around that, and he doesn't have any sort of sex or any sort of like sexual fulfillment. I think the most he does is kiss and get a boner. So anyway, I have been talking about that book way too long, so let's move on to my next read and see if I like it or not. Alright, next up, One Last Stop by Casey Mcwhiston. This wasn't awful. The tropes in here weren't anything that I hated. The like romantic comedy aspect of it wasn't bad. The plot was goofy but not offensive. The miscommunication was probably one of the better ways you can do miscommunication, because it was mostly like lack of communication and not miscommunication, right? So not the worst thing ever, but also not great. I didn't like Jane as a love interest. Like her trying to bring up her memories and talking about like all of these women that she slept with the new love interest, it doesn't do it for me. I understand that people have past, and some people don't care about their partner's previous partners. But that's not how I would want to build a relationship, is talking about my partner's previous partners, if that makes sense. And this was almost a 3-star, except for one little thing. her one big thing that dropped it down to 2, and that is they have sex on the subway multiple times, which is the nastiest thing that I could possibly imagine. Having sex on the New York City subway. Ew. That's nothing but disgusting. Yeah. Yeah. Ew. It was okay. 2 stars. Not the worst thing I've ever read in romance by far. If it sounds interesting to you and it doesn't entirely gross you out to think about sex on the New York City subway, then go ahead and read it. If you're a big sci-fi fan, I might avoid this because like the magic sci-fi-ness is totally unrealistic. It didn't really bother me, but I could see it bothering other people. Anyway, let's move on to the next one. Hello. I'm interrupting this regularly scheduled program because I still need a 6th book for this vlog. A 3rd book that I want to read. So, this is my answer. And no, I'm not going to read one of these books. These are all books that I've already read that I don't want anymore. So I'm going to take these right now to Half Price Books, trade them in, and just find some random used romance on the shelves of Half Price Books and read that. Doesn't that sound fun? Sure. So yeah, I'm gonna trade all of these in, see what I can get, and then I'll come back and talk about what book I picked out and why. I'm hoping for something completely ridiculous, but we'll take it as we get it. Possibly shocking no one, I'm very indecisive, and I couldn't decide between going for just one of those insane historic romance like 1980s covers and potentially getting a very problematic book, or going with an author that I've already read and I have a general idea of what I'm getting from them. And so I'm on 2 books. So this beauty, this gorgeous example of a romance cover that was published in, let's find out, 2002. This isn't as old as I thought it was. So this is published in 2002, and this is my like pick. But there is a chance, based on the description, that our heroine is sexually assaulted by our hero. And I know that happens in historical romance sometimes, but I don't understand how you think you're gonna get an even vaguely redeemable hero if he sexually assaults the heroine, but it happens. So if that is the case as I read this, then obviously I'm gonna DNF it. And I picked up Plum Lovin' by Jenna Jovanovic because I've read like 20 something of the Stephanie Plum novels, so I'm familiar. I started reading this when there was literally just one for the money out back when I was in high school, and I think this is like a Between the Numbers novel, and I think this is the Valentine's Day one, which is why I particularly picked this one. So this is the main book we're gonna read. This is the backup if something is wrong with this book. Let's cross our fingers that this goes well. Okay. I have finished Stolen. Look at this. Look how fantastically awful this cover is. And you know what? The cover kind of describes the book. Fantastically awful. Objectively, this book is bad. Like, wow. But I kind of enjoyed reading it. It's got dubious consent, not when it comes to like sexual activities, but definitely with other stuff leading up to sex, and you need to have consent for everything. That's how it works. The plot line is goofy and ridiculous, which I should probably tell you what the plot of this is, I guess. So this follows Rose and Drummond. And Drummond is a Scottish Highlander, and his entire family has been killed. He was not killed along with the rest of his family or clan because he had like stepped on a nail a few days before and was like delirious and feverish. And Rose is like the bastard daughter of a lord, and once her father died, their stepmother, who was the lord's wife, like kicked them out. No money. I don't want to see the bastard children of my husband ever again. And so she's kind of down on her luck and resorts to stealing. So she is trying to steal 2 emeralds called the Eye of the Tiger, I think, from the mistress of this wealthy lord. And Drummond is trying to kill the mistress of this wealthy lord, because the wealthy lord is who was responsible for killing his entire family, and he wants revenge. And so he's going to take away something that this guy loves. So he goes in there, thinks Rose is the mistress, can't bring himself to kill her, and he kidnaps her and takes her to New France, which is Canada. And then they fall in love. The romance, cheesy, bad. Doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's the typical, she falls in love with him and tells him, but he can't say he loves her because it would be a betrayal of his family. And then the writing's bad. The writing out a Scottish accent, awful. The sex scenes, awful, but like hilariously so. Like very stereotypical, his member engorged type things. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this. It's going to get a 3 stars because it gets stars for enjoyment, but it is like objectively bad. Like, there's no redeeming how bad this book is. It was just really funny to read. So I read it in more of like a humorous tone than I think it was supposed to have. I enjoyed my nice early 2000s historical fantasy crotch warmer, and let's move on to the next book. Okay, time to talk about Desperate Measures by Katie Robert. He said he wants to be in the background, so he's gonna be in the background looking like trouble. Aren't you? Aren't you? You be nice. Yeah, come here. So nice. Alright, he's way too excited. This is smut. This is like, the sex starts from like right from the beginning and it continues throughout the book. So there is a plot, but I think the idea is to mainly focus on the sex scenes here. So the plot of this is, what do they call it? Non-consensual consent. Not something I ever heard of, but it makes sense. It is basically where they play act that he is sexually assaulting her, but she has a safe word And there's a lot of like thoughts and conversations where like, yes, she trusts him. Yes, she knows that this is acting. He knows that it's acting. And anytime she actually uses the safe word, he instantly stops. Interesting kink, I guess. But the idea of this is a an Aladdin retelling, but Jasmine's father is a mafia boss in this fantasy world, and Jafar is her right-hand man, and then her father is very abusive and he sells her to Ali, who is like another mafia boss. And Jasmine doesn't want to be sold, and Jafar doesn't want her to be sold to Ali, so he has a coup, overthrows her father, and then takes her as a prize. She's been locked up to be protected her entire life, and she just wants any sort of freedom that she can, and she's not really, like, her life is better with Jafar, but she's still treated as like a slave and stuff like that. Overall, it was interesting. Pretty good. I didn't have any problem with it. It was very short. Actually, I take that back. I did have a problem with it. He called her baby girl and she called him daddy, and that it's kind of, I mean, I get people do it, but it's kind of icky to me. I don't have daddy issues, so I kind of cringed a little bit every time I read their baby girl daddy exchanges. But yeah, I kind of liked it. I would be willing to read more in the series and more by Katie Roberts in general, which is probably good because I think I need to read Neon Gods this year. Maybe not. I don't know. But yeah. If you like smut, I recommend it. I would love somebody to nicely in the comments explain why this is a sensation. First off, it feels very generic, even if it wasn't like horribly bad. So it's just like, I've read this contemporary romance before a lot of times. There's nothing new in it. Is this like fan service with a lot of tropes? Is that why it's popular? Because it feels like it's got the same layout as just any generic contemporary romance. Like the story unfolds in the same way. And the characters are generic at best. There's nothing like new or interesting in this one. In my opinion, it was like real fucking awful. So our main character, Lena, or Catalina, is a huge bitch. She meets this guy, Aaron, on the first day of them working together, and he doesn't seem to like her, which is fair. You don't have to like everybody. And then she eavesdrops on him and hears a conversation where he says that I don't want to work with her. So first off, she automatically assumes it's about her and doesn't like find any context behind that. Like, that's all the phone conversation was, like, please anybody but her, I don't want to work with her. That's it. That was the insult. And she has held this grudge and been nothing but an absolute hateful bitch in a work environment to this guy for the past year and a half. And like the beginning of the book, we're getting this internal monologue from her where she is just going on and on about how much of a dickhead this guy is, and he is doing nothing but being polite and nice to her. Like, he's talking to her, so we've got his conversation with her and then her internal monologue. He's not, this is a very tell and not show, because she is telling us how much of a dickbag and an absolute asshole this guy is, but he's not showing any of it. He has been nothing but gentlemanly and wonderful in every single conversation in this book. Like, this guy is perfect perfect Prince Charming throughout the entire book, and she's being a righteous bitch. So it's like, why would he like her is really my question. Like, she has done nothing in this entire book to deserve him liking her. So the plot of this book is she has this ex-boyfriend that is her sister's fiance's brother. So he's the best man, and she needs to go to the wedding, but she doesn't want to go single to this wedding because of her ex is just engaged. And so she lies to her family saying she's got this boyfriend and then needs to find a boyfriend. And that's where our character Aaron steps in, where he volunteers to be her fake boyfriend. So we've got the fake dating, shared bed situation type of things throughout the book. But it's just like, you're a 30-year-old woman. Why are you so insecure about being single? Like, the vibes that this gives off of, like, you're not complete and people don't respect you unless you have a relationship like that. All of that is gross. Maybe it's because I'm old and bitter, but, like, it just feels gross to read about. There's also like a lot of little microaggressions in the first part of the book, like the lead up intro part of the book had a lot more of this than the back end. Like, as I got further into the book, all of this it just went like straight flirty romance shit in this stuff stopped. But there's a sexist character, there's fat shaming, mostly fat shaming herself. No one else seems to care that she eats a lot, but there's like she almost has an eating disorder because she's trying to lose weight to look good for the wedding, and she literally passes out. She faints because she refuses to eat. So there's like glorifying of an eating disorder to create a meet cute type of situation. There's failure to respect people's boundaries. Like, she tells the love interest, like, no, and he doesn't take no for an answer. Even if she's like, I want you but don't want you, I want you but don't want you. She articulates the word no multiple times, and he fails to respect her boundaries. So even if in her mind she's like, but yes, I want you to, but I'm saying no, but yes, he can't read her mind. He needs to, like, men and women need to go off what comes out of your mouth, not what's going through your mind. And then, like, so, like, the first part of the book before they start fake dating is an absolute shit show, and I would have 100% DNF'd this if I was like actually interested in reading the book in the first place. Like, I knew going into this I wouldn't like it, and that it had a bunch of tropes that I don't like. Big on the miscommunication trope, let me tell you. But I knew what I was getting into, and I knew that I was going to push through and finish this. But if I didn't know what I was getting into, I would have quickly DNF'd this after all of the problematic content in the first part of the book. The second half of the book gives off big How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days vibes. Like, specifically the scene where they're hanging out with his family for the day and he's like, no, I really like this chick. Like, that's the vibes that the second half of this book gives off. But even then, there's still like things that annoyed me in the book. Going back to like, what does he see in her? Like, I couldn't imagine. Throughout the entire book, he's like, I've been in love with you since I first met you. And I'm just sitting here in my head screaming like, why? Why have you been in love with her? She's awful and ignorant and over dramatic, and I wouldn't date her. And she is nothing like me. Are 20-year-old girls like seeing themselves in this awful woman? And that's why they like this book so much? If so, that's really fucking concerning. Like, oh my god. Kind of the other other things that I didn't like but don't really have like a place for me to talk about them. The book is full of pop culture references, like overdone pop culture references that are going to date this book so badly, and it got so annoying so fast. Like, I don't care. It did not need all of these pop culture references. And then the other thing, the sex scene. I'm listening to this on an audiobook, right? And it's going through the sex scene, which is kind of cringy, and it may just be because I was listening to a sex scene in an audiobook. I've never done that before. If there's a sex scene in a book, I've always just read it. So maybe the uncomfortableness with it just came from like listening to this woman who's the narrator narrate the sex scene. But the main character, or I'm sorry, but the guy, his line, it was so awful I had to write it down. He said, "I want you to milk me, baby." No, he didn't. I literally had to take my earphones out and yell into the other room at my boyfriend, just, "I want you to milk me, baby," with no context whatsoever. Please, no. But yeah, I hated the Spanish love deception and I gave it a 1. So I've read my romances for Valentine's Day, these plus 2 books that I don't have physically. I had these 3 as books that I thought I would like. I enjoyed all 3 of them to varying degrees. So turns out I'm fairly good at predicting which romances that I will somewhat enjoy. The books that I don't like, I only have one last stop with me, but I'll put pictures of the other 2 up here. And I went into this knowing that I probably would not like these, but needed to read them for, you know, various Goodreads projects, really. And One Last Stop was not awful. It wasn't great, and I was super disgusted, but it wasn't awful. These two, garbage. Now, are all 3 of these books really popular and a lot of people like them, and you will probably like them even though I hated them? Definitely. 100% definitely. If you typically like contemporary romance and these books sound good to you, don't take my word for it. This is my personal taste in books, and I think it's funny to read really popular books that I know I'm going to dislike, because I read 260 books a year, so I have the free time to spend on reading trash that I know I'm not going to enjoy, just for the funny content that you're going to get out of it. So it turns out I'm also good at predicting books that I'm not going to like. I think I might be better at predicting books that I'm not going to like versus predicting books that I am going to like. I want to know if you've read any of these books, if you're planning on reading any of these books, and what you thought about them. I want you in the comments to convince me nicely to be a contemporary romance reader. And if you haven't read any of these books and you made it this far in the video, leave some sort of romance emoji. You could do like a kissing couple, a heart, a rose, something romancy to celebrate Valentine's Day, which was yesterday, but I don't upload on Mondays, so you get it today. And that's it for this video. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.